Hi everyone, so the four of us from TTI were really lucky to get the chance to be living and working remotely overseas, and we got the chance to live in 8 different countries and experience what it's really like to be remote working. As more people consider remote working, we thought it would be a good idea to share some of the experiences we had, the pros and cons, as well as answer some of the questions you guys had for us on Instagram. Of course, we also understand that remote working is not for everyone, but for those who are considering it, we hope that this video would help. Without further ado, let's get on to it. I'm sure when we think of working remotely overseas, most of us dream of working on a beach, with a drink in our hand, typing on a laptop, and I just want to say that that's usually not the case. I mean, there were occasions where we had really good views, but it's usually not that glamorous. Most days are spent working at home or at a cafe, putting in the hours while we try our best to communicate with our pals back in Singapore. There are good days, bad days, OT days, really like how things would be like when we are working back home. Sometimes things can get really challenging and not productive. Most people think that when you're working remotely overseas, you have all the time in the world to explore the city. I remember when we first started, it was a real struggle because we were so close to all these beautiful places we wanted to visit, but we can't because of all the work that we had to do. Even for us, where our work involves traveling, we have to specifically set aside time to go out there to collect content and to explore. It actually took us a couple of months before we got into the rhythm of things and to optimize our life better for more work-life balance, but more on that later. And of course, money. Working remotely might seem like a dream, but finances can get really tricky. Things like rent, accommodation, activities, and food can quickly add up. At least we know that back in Singapore, most of us still stay with our parents and public transport is okay while food is pretty affordable. Even if your job allows you to work remotely overseas, it still needs to be something within our means. We quickly realized that the cost varies drastically from country to country. A metro ride in London starts from SGD $4 and a normal meal can be easily over 20 bucks. Whereas in Bangkok, the metro starts from like 60 cents and good street food can be as low as $2. Even though we're not out exploring every day, the activities in our off time can still be pretty significant. Road trips, day tours, adventure sports, museums, they all require money. That said, there are still plenty of ways to keep costs low, which we'll be sharing later. And if you think about it as if you're combining your budget from your individual holiday with this, it's actually pretty okay. Did we miss home? Yes, to varying degrees. Some of us miss the comfort of hanging out with our loved ones, while others just miss going out with our friends. For us, it was also unique that we're living and working with our teammates. While we're friends and we're comfortable hanging out with each other, it can still be a little bit challenging when you're spending so much time together inside and outside of work. Not to mention, some of them are living with their bosses. I know, I made remote working sound less attractive. But if done right, this can actually be a pretty life-changing experience. So here's the good stuff. For a start, work-life balance. While most of our week was spent working, we still had the weekends to go out and explore. In fact, the weekends are pretty action-packed. Cherie would go skydiving, Clarence explored the city while hunting for the best local food, and Kim would go on hikes in every country we lived in. But we didn't just explore in the weekends. Sometimes we'll shift our work schedules around to squeeze in time before, during, or after work hours for some adventures. In the Philippines, I went free diving over a long lunch, and in Sydney, we went surfing in the morning before the workday started. The freedom was great and we loved it. One of the best things about working and living remotely is that you can easily move and change when you're feeling restless. For us, we spent about a month at each location, exploring as much as we could before restarting again. Some might also think that many places seem the same after a while, but living long-term gives us the opportunity to find the little nuances that make the city unique. Cliché, but long-term travel can be a pretty transformative experience. It pulls you out of your comfort zone and throws you into the unknown. It was also our first time living and working remotely for so long, and of course, all of us became a lot more independent and better at adulting. Overall, you grow a lot as a person and learning is good. Overall, I found myself being a lot more productive because I wanted to spend more time outside. While I still OT, it was a lot less than before because I was more motivated to finish stuff before the weekend. After the initial settling in period, I think most of us became a lot less distracted. And I think we started consciously being more aware on how to optimize our time for productivity. I can go on and on about how awesome it is, which is why I want to now share some practical tips that we discovered if this is something that you are considering. So here are some tips on how to save money. Eating out can get expensive, so it's time to bring out the master chef in you. I personally love cooking a lot, so this was the fun part. But even if you can't cook, I assure you that after a while, you'll get the hang of it. I remember how Kim transformed from needing instructions to cutting vegetables to becoming a chef. Living long-term also gives you the flexibility of not sticking to a fixed travel schedule and allows you to wait out for the best deals. For example, in London, you can wait out for last-minute musical tickets, whereas in places like Spain, there are days where you get free entries to museums and stuff like that. Lastly, get a multi-currency card for your daily expenses, which helps you to save money and it's really convenient. It took us a while, but eventually we all found different ways of settling in and staying productive. Firstly, routines. Instead of the typical 1 to 2 week settling in period, routines basically gave us a structure to follow every time we arrive in a new city. Cherie will book an early morning exercise class on the first work day after we arrive. The thing about working remotely, especially if you're working from home, is that the environment can get stifling after a while. In Portugal and Spain, where we stayed a bit longer, I found it really useful to head on to like a cafe or co-working space every now and then for a change of environment. I promise you that extra coffee or cover charge is worth it. Other than scheduling regular calls with your loved ones, it's also important to find your own community abroad. It might seem daunting, but there are actually many ways to make friends overseas, from meeting people during activities to even joining community groups in each city. Kim would regularly join Yes Theory community meetups, and she even celebrated Christmas with a bunch of couch surfers in Portugal. Whatever your interest is, I'm pretty sure there's a community that fits. Probably the single most important decision you got to make beyond like budget and standards of living is to find a neighborhood that is able to support what you want to achieve in a place. In Barcelona, we stayed in the heart of town and could walk almost everywhere, which was why we explored a lot after work. If you're traveling alone, do consider staying in a hostel to meet other people when you want to. Some people still think that hostels are rowdy and dirty, but honestly these days, there are plenty of premium hostels with private rooms where you can get the privacy while still having the opportunity to meet other people. Finding the right location also means finding a base with a suitable time zone for work. It's fine if you are working alone, but for us, we needed to connect with our teammates back in Singapore, so in Europe, that 8-hour time difference was a nightmare for us. Whereas when we were back in Asia, it was really easy because everything just fit. So find a place that works for you and your lifestyle. When planning a trip, most of us only think of the logistics and financial side of things, but it's also important to manage your own expectations. After living overseas and working remotely for the last 10 months, the single thing I wish we did was to work on our expectations and objectives before the trip. That would have definitely helped us a lot in transitioning and also being a lot more productive. If you're traveling with friends, discuss your objectives, expectations and ground rules together. But if you're traveling alone, find a trusted friend where you can run these things through. So here's what it's like to be living and working remotely overseas. While our situation is unique, I'm sure there are still many things that you'll find useful. It may seem scary at first, but I assure you it's gonna be worth it. I loved every part about it, the freedom, the experience, the ability to travel so much, and we'll be exploring more ways of making this possible for the team. If you have more questions on living and working remotely, do let us know in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next video.